Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me well. Oh, this microphone is working well. Um, my name is David Kemper. I'm a digital experience librarian at McMaster University. And I'm going to talk about web accessibility and trying to make the case that there's a strong link between web accessibility and user experience and how building inclusive websites make websites better for everyone. Let's see, go forward. Okay, there we go. As I mentioned, I'm working at McMaster University, so I just want to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the fact that the university is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. So a little bit about myself and my background. I've been at McMaster for about 10 years now. I manage the library's 28 plus public and staff web interfaces. And also I manage the library's digital scholarship and research infrastructure team. So that's roughly a team of 2 web developers, 2 equally talented web developers, 2 awesome system administrators, and 1 UX specialist who recently joined our team on a contractual basis. So I really love technology and how people interact with technology. So this is what's kind of driven me to trying to find ways to how technology can solve some big problems that we encounter in the library. On a side note, I'm actually born from Montreal and I studied in Montreal and I worked in Montreal. And so it's exciting to be presenting at Montreal. So this makes this time extra special for myself to be here. Okay, what I'm going to try and tackle today is a couple of definitions to get it out of the way. Talking a little bit about our design thinking project that we worked on at McMaster and the results of that project. Talking a little bit about our tool that that the university purchased, a web accessibility checker tool, and then argue or discuss a little bit more about the bonds between web accessibility and user experience, and wrap up with some recent developments and some future challenges for all of us to consider. So definitions. So when I talk about user experience, I'm sure maybe most of us are familiar with it, but I just want to kind of let's lay the groundwork so that we're all on the same page. So this encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with a company, with a service, or its products. So I'm thinking about within the library context, it's more than just a user interface or usability. It's taking those elements, combining them together, which is the outcome. The user experience is the outcome. Again, and within the library context, the library website is often the first point of contact for students and faculty and researchers. And the goal is that each one of them have a positive, satisfying, frictionless experience when they engage with our digital interfaces. Meanwhile, web accessibility focused on ensuring that web interfaces and technology can be used with people with disabilities. Again, this is taken from the Norman Nielsen Group. I forgot to mention that in the previous slide. It's focusing on accommodation. So creating a user interface that is accessible to assistive devices, for example. So again, web accessibility is part of the user experience, particularly for those with people with disabilities. Design thinking. This is something that we have adopted on and off in our work at McMaster when we're working on either a new interface or a new project. This was something that we started doing with our previous website redesign, was something I presented on back in 2019 and at Access, and I think it was Edmonton, right before the pandemic. So essentially, design thinking has 6 elements, and it's an iterative process. It's about understanding the user. It's about being able for the user to express themselves freely so that you can start to define what are their pain points, what are their frustrations, what are the problems that they're encountering. And we're working together, we ideate, we brainstorm, and then we come up with some prototypes. We test out those prototypes with the user again. And then once we come to a reasonable solution, then we can implement it. So here, just as a graphic, again, from the Norman Nielsen Group, because you get a sense of the cyclical nature of design thinking. It's never really a finished product. It's kind of an ongoing process of continual contact with the user, and as well as implementing new features, and then again working with the user as well. So the project that we had at the library. So between 2020 and 2022, when we were all trying to figure out, okay, what do we do now with the campus closed? We figured this is maybe a good time to start thinking about how do we maybe still reach out and connect with our users. So we wanted to apply design thinking to collect information about the library's search interface at that time. So we decided to conduct user interviews with a diverse set of students, including students who identified as having disabilities. And we want to also expand and increase our understanding of their particular needs. We also wanted to try to do usability testing as well, remotely at this point, of course. And again, through design thinking, identify problems, pain points with the interface. And then from there, we would assess the data collected and then implement those changes. So in terms of conducting the interviews as well as doing the usability testing, we really tried to seek out students from a diverse groups that we knew on campus. So such groups included the IT Student Advisory Committee, which is a group that is formed by Central IT that solicits feedback from students about how they find technology on campus, what are their experiences with technology on campus. We reached out to Student Accessibility Services. We also tapped some student members of the University Libraries Advisory Committee. And of course, because of COVID-19, all those user interviews and usability testing were done remotely through MS Teams. And with consent, the sessions were recorded. So in total, we had 14 student volunteers, including 3 students who identified as having a disability. So when we interviewed them, we tried to ask, in keeping with the design thinking approach, open-ended questions and questions that elicited an emotional response. So some fact-based things about how often do you use the library website, or describing your first experience using the library's website, or library search interface rather. Describe your latest experience using the library search interface, and also describing a positive or delightful experience using the library search interface. And also, from the flip side, a negative or frustrating experience. And I think the key thing here, what we learned as we were doing this process, was we weren't trying to tell the students what we wanted to hear, like, is there a problem with the button, or is there a problem with the tab, or a problem with the location? We just kind of gave them that openness to say, tell us your issues, like describe to us what are you experiencing? So that's the key thing about the first step, is empathizing with the user. So understanding them. So rather than assuming, we're trying to understand their situation, their point of view, their experiences. So their motivations, their desires, their frustrations. We shared in their lived experiences, how they study, where they study, how age, gender, culture, language, whether they were first year or third year, how all these different things affected their experience of the library. So I think the theme that I want to like to focus on is really, through this process, our team really started to develop an understanding and also a more of an appreciation of our students. And I think that's really key. I'm trying to steer us away from assuming that we know what our students need, or what our faculty need, or what our researchers need, and really try to understand them. And we really felt this design thinking was an approach that we could use to really enable that for us. So the second stage, we defined the problem. So by giving students room to steer the conversation, we were able to kind of get a sense of where they were having issues with a relatively scoped out section of the website, the search interface. And some folks came up with, maybe the labels were unclear or misunderstood, or the screen reader. There was challenges using the screen reader on our interface. Others complained, I shouldn't say that. Others were concerned about the colors design, caused distractions, or even in some cases anxiety too. It was very, an anxiety-inducing experience. So the next step that we took, was brainstorming, essentially. So when the problem was clearly defined, we decided to brainstorm a little bit more. How can we fix or write those? How can we make changes to the interface based upon those the issues that were defined? So there was no right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of sharing ideas, amplifying ideas, and then linking these ideas together. The fourth stage is prototyping. So using the ideas, we developed a lightweight prototype. So nothing too fancy, a mock-up or a simplified search interface. So we aim to keep it simple because we know there's going to be an iterative process. So we know we're going to be revisiting this again. So it's no need to get our developers involved and mocking up something in Drupal, or we just try to keep it simple. So even this is a sketch that we did, or what we use either a Figma or what was it? Oh, shoot, I forgot the name of the program, but it designs little wireframe products, wireframe mockups. testing. So we scheduled a second interview with the student volunteers. Now, some were unable to attend due to other commitments, but those who could were thankful to be interviewed again. And I think, again, this is something else too that's important, is that it wasn't in vain. I hope that they understood that them giving their time was not just like them just saying things to us and we would just make notes and, just leave it at that. So by bringing them back in, we got more feedback, more comments, and then more changes were suggested. Last but not least, after further refinements, we implemented a simplified search interface. So again, this was a very a simple, we didn't want to do this too complicated. We just, again, scoped it out to the search interface. The feedback that we got was, participants, they wanted more of a personalized approach. They wanted a clean, modern search interface with little or no clutter. Some members who were partially sighted, they thought that the tabs were too light, so we took that into consideration. Another found that some of the tags on the interface were actually incorrectly done on the website. So things that we were not aware of, they brought these things to light for us. So this is our web interface, circa maybe like 2022 or so. At the time, it seemed okay for for us who see it every day. But from our feedback, we attempted to try to do some decluttering. So this is how things kind of looked, maybe near the end of 2022. So a little bit less the tabs, a little bit more, trying to keep things a little bit more simple. And then eventually, and again, things take time, of course, when we eventually moved to Omni, which is our consortial library catalog, we took a lot of that feedback and said, how can we simplify the search interface even more? So this is the end result that we have right now for today, is this feature. So again, it was a small project, it was tightly scoped, but it gave us this opportunity to tap into our users, get their feedback, and then try and implement something that they found that was of some use, of some better than it was before. Design thinking pros, advantages, it provides a really rich and insightful feedback from our users. It makes us aware of issues that we may not have thought of, provides an opportunity to engage with our users in a mutually beneficial way. And it's actually particularly useful in initial design phase or when reviewing or assessing a service. The cons, it was time consuming. And I think because during the COVID, we had to figure out MS Teams, how to record remote meetings and all this stuff. It was quite time consuming, just learning the whole process. Resource heavy. Our team had to take up some time from their day-to-day work to commit to this work, to the interviews and the following up with the analysis and the different stages of our work. So it definitely takes longer than one thinks. So keep those in mind if you're considering using design thinking. So know thy users. So the results of all this really, I think, tried to hammer home, for us at least, that it's super important that when we're designing, whatever we're designing, think about the end user. And I think for everyone here, we get that, but I think this approach really gets us to more fully understand our users. We get to share in what they experience. We actually acknowledge the different disabilities students may have and how those disabilities affect their experiences. And on the right there, I just listed some of the disabilities that maybe some of our students have, that they have to how can we support them in their needs? And also give voice to underrepresented students as well. Intentionally solicit. So we intentionally solicited student feedback from student volunteers to help out from diverse groups across campus, which is not really easy. So we really have to build our network with student accessibility services and with others who we could really say, like, we are here to help. We're supporters, we're allies, we want to work with you. And I think building up those really respectful relationships allowed us to tap into some of those students to volunteer their time to help us out. And in turn, we can help them out. So key point here, really understanding the diverse needs of our users, trying to remove our assumptions and focus on solving their problems. Again, removing those assumptions that we might have or biases that we might have, and just really hear their raw experiences and then defining what problems they have and how better we can solve those problems. So another thing that we are currently working with, and this is kind of a phase 2 project here, it started, I think, maybe 2023 or so, The university purchased a product called PopeTech, which is essentially it's a web accessibility checker tool, and it's based on the Wave tool. So if you're familiar with that whole world of web accessibility, it's powered by that technology. So PopeTech is really powerful. It allows us to audit all 28 plus of our websites. It gives us, and I'll show you a little screen here. It gives us alerts, contrast errors, major errors, and it really kind of breaks I think you can see it here down on the bottom left here. There's a little snippet of all the different websites that we currently have that are being monitored by the tool. So very powerful. It really was a game changer for us in terms of how we are able to identify issues, web accessibility issues with our websites, how we're able to tackle them, how we're able to see sometimes even trends like a pattern emerging of what's some of the common mistakes that we see on our websites. So remediate the common errors. It allowed us also to, again, in Ontario, we have the Ontario Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which was introduced in 2005. So our goal is also to make sure that our core institutional websites, and in this case, it's our core library website, needs to be up to the most recent standards. So using this tool has really enabled us to keep pressing forward and achieving those goals. And as I mentioned earlier, there's patterns that emerge about web accessibility issues. So we use LinkedIn Learning to create learning paths. I don't know if anyone's familiar with LinkedIn learning paths, but essentially it's a playlist of educational videos that you can piece together, and our wonderful developer put together a list of these playlists, of videos rather, that are accessibility focused. And then we share these videos, these playlists with our web content editors so that they in turn can get a good understanding of how to feel empowered to make accessible content on the library website. So the bonds between web accessibility and user experience. So here I had to introduce a meme here. So this is the epic handshake with between Arnold Schwarzenegger and I think Carl Weathers. Anyway, so I feel that user experience, hooking up with, in collaborative efforts and web accessibility working together, I think can really build a better user experience overall. So what are those bonds like? So I feel both really strive to be inclusive and user-centered. Both strive to improve and enhance user interfaces and usability, and both strive to reduce pain points and friction for users, regardless of their ability or disability. So here, essentially what I'm trying to say, when we design something, a web-based product, a service, whatever it may be, if we can keep accessibility in mind, indirectly or directly, we improve the user experience for all. And the flip side is when we focus on user experience, we often make more accessible and inclusive websites. So I think it really just goes hand in hand. These two concepts working together can have better outcomes for everyone. Yeah, but is it easy to do? No, it's tough. It's a lot of work. Does it require additional development time and technical resources? Yes, it does. Can we address all the needs of everyone on their different needs and accessibility needs? Unfortunately, no, it's very hard. Do I wish I had more time to work on this? Yeah, I do. I wish I had more time. Do we need to learn more and stay current with what's happening in this environment? Yes, we do. And at the end of the day, can we make everybody happy? And the answer is no. We just have to try and do our best and just build up capacity and do what we can in this effort. Recent developments at the university, here I've just cited two of them. Manual web accessibility testing, it will be starting in November at the university. And this is amazing, really. They've hired people with disabilities to evaluate universities' institutional websites. Now, it's been very challenging for those with disabilities to get paid for offering their advice. So in this context, the university rather is going to be hiring individuals. This is really good. So I'm really looking forward to the results of these tests. And that's coming out in November. And also the university has gone through kind of an evolution of their branding. So we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, plus branding, a focus on plain language, a focus on inclusive language. So on the right, I shared some of the guidance or the guidelines that they're offering and how the web content should address the different groups that form our community. And I think this is also part of the experience too. When you see yourself represented on a community, on a website, and you know you're part of that community, you feel you're part of that community. So I think this also is part of the process of user experience and web accessibility, is that the language there is inclusive of who you are and the community you belong to. So future challenges, technology is forever changing. I mean, it's really challenging to ensure that we have accessibility for all these new changes in technology, and to ensure a positive user experience. There's always evolving needs. Our users are, I was at a conference the other day, or a meeting, and they're talking about multi-generational workforce. And there's most likely multi-generational students out there, and there's just so much to consider, and how best to address all their needs. Laws, compliance, that's evolving too. So how to keep up to date with that. The need to expand our knowledge of web accessibility and user experience, that's a given. And also trying to find ways to measure and quantify and demonstrate to our leadership group the value of investing time and money into web accessibility and user experience initiatives, from both for the perspective of the organization and for users. So in closing, if we collaborate together, multidisciplinary teams, if we adopt frameworks that help us to come up with some innovative thinking and engage the end user from start to finish, and use some technology to help us along the way, I'm really confident we can solve our problems, even if this is one big problem at a time. This is, if I have time, acknowledgements. Obviously, this was not just done by me. There's a team of people behind this. So phase one, I just want to call out some of my great colleagues, Debbie Lawler, Kathy Ball, Sandra Rakovac, Susanna Galbraith. And the second phase of our project, Debbie Lawler again, our web developer, Annie Wang, and the Web and Public Interfaces Committee. And a special thank you to Mark Wheeler. If anybody knows him, he's from Laurier. He's a strong advocate for web accessibility. Super, intelligent guy, really passionate about the topic, and he definitely inspired this presentation and the work that we do as well. Thank you.
Show of hands. I have one question. Can you give an example of a response for a delightful experience with the search interface?
Good question. Well, the typical delightful thing was how it was like the serendipity of searching. Like basically someone would search for, they would use a keyword and they would stumble upon something that they had no clue existed, like a resource or a book or a journal that they didn't know, and that led them to a new direction in their research work. So that was something that was delightful for them. So something that was this unknown, like a bit of a surprise, like, oh, that resource exists. Wow, that's neat. That kind of thing was the delightful experience.
Okay, I'm not going to ask about the negative side of things, because I think when you do this type of thing, you expect more people's concerns or frustrations. So I was really interested in the delightful side. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes. I know for users, they don't know the difference between what the library does and what they're accessing via vendors. Did you get feedback about vendor-related products as part of this, or is there a piece of this where you're talking to colleagues who are buying subscriptions and so on? Are you advocating? I'm just wondering if this is moved beyond just the library website.
At the moment, no. It was just really scoped to the search interface. Again, I guess you consider this kind of like a pilot project of using design thinking. But I would love to just kind of build out more of these opportunities to get that kind of feedback, to collect that feedback. Again, when my work is really operational in a sense, so it's having that time to actually dedicate to this interviewing and feedback either from staff or from students. It's challenging, but yeah, I think that'd be a great idea to do something like that.
I love to think that vendors would welcome that kind of feedback if they got it from us. And I would love to know if anybody's actually passed it along to them and had that experience.
Yeah, that'd be quite valuable experience, valuable information for them though, because knowing the stumbling points for vendor-based interfaces. Yeah.